Cool. So, first of all, I can introduce yourself for the audience.
Yeah. So my name's Jeremy Fischer. I was a um, somewhat elite high jumper, jumped 229, and was actually not supposed to be a coach. I went to college to be a doctor, and they asked me to help out with the college track team at the University of Wisconsin, and I kind of just fell in love with being a coach. And from there, my path has been my degrees were in molecular biology and nutritional science, and I had a master in nutrition. But I knew for coaching, I needed a little bit of variety of coaching and certification. So I went back and got a master's in exercise physiology and biomechanics from a school called Cal State Northridge. I was also coaching there and coached my first national champion there. And then after that, I got my certifications like USA Track and Field, World Athletics, got my CSCS from NSCA, got my USA weightlifting certification. I got, massage therapy. I just wanted to be encompassing for kind of all that. And Dan Path, who, one of the great minds in the world, he was kind of like the kind of a mentor and a person who taught me. And so I was like, I want to be like that, where I have all that kind of things. And as I've learned, now coach and then I get people who are better in those different areas to help me. So, I talk to the greatest strength coaches and all that. But basically, about 13 years ago, I was a coach at the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista, which is near San Diego, California. And since I've been there, besides national champions in NCAA, I got out of NCAA, worked with both Paralympic and Olympic athletes, and I've been fortunate to coach 18 Olympic and Paralympic athletes, worked with NFL athletes, worked with people who Major League Baseball players, some winter sports athletes, and then I work with athletes all over the world. And we were talking earlier, but I work with athletes from China, from Korea, from India, from Latvia, Mexico, Guatemala, U.S., so Canada. So a lot of different athletes from a lot of different places, and so now I own my own business. It's called MVA Athletics, Max Velocity Athletics, Maximum Velocity Athletics, and through there we do camps, clinics, work with like athletes from all over the world, and work on speed, agility, all those kind of things, as well as actual technical jumping and things like that. So
Cool. I love that. I love that. And you also mentioned that the great mind Dan Path. I was like, he was good. He was so good.
yeah, Dan is amazing. I was lucky because when I first got started, it was people like Dan Path, Boo Schexnayder, um, and gosh, I'm trying to think of more names. But I mean, I kind of came at the time where some of the originators and creators of coaching education came. So I personally got to listen to, different coaches and stuff. And then you learn, Vershansky stuff and Boompa stuff and things like that. I later on was able to then meet coaches like Nelly O'Mora, who's a great coach. I got to meet, I know Raina Ryder. I mean, we came up together basically, and so forth. We've known each other for a long time, and been able to watch him coach. He's super successful. I got to sit there and spend time with Wolfgang Ritzdorf in Germany and Franz Bosch when he was in the Netherlands. So I've just been fortunate to be around, and I've just kind of been that person who just kind of leeches onto people, try to learn as much as I can, and just educate myself. And so when people went on vacations, I went to Germany or I went to the Netherlands or Holland or wherever it was, so I could sleep on the just watch practice and talk to the people face to face, and that was vacation for me.
Love that. Love that. So the first question is like, we talked before, is like not I see like speed training and like high jump or long jump. the next puzzle or like the next piece for uh the performance training. So for like increasing like athletes' vertical jumping ability, can you like talk a little bit about this? How do you like increase athletes' jumping ability?
Well, I think that full out max velocity sprinting is probably one of the most plyometric things you can do. Okay, I mean, you've got so many components that I kind of agree with what plyometric training or reactive strength training is. You're on the ground from like 0.99 seconds or 0.099 seconds to about 0.10 seconds, maybe 0.11, different sprints. And if you look as far as like jumping, so long jump is like 0.12 to 0.13 seconds on the ground. A high jump is 0.14 to 0.16 on the ground. A triple jump somewhere between 0.13, 0.14, something like that. So you're talking single support, a really quick contact on the ground and really quick off. And all those sprinting, jumping, they all share the same quality. And it's the force velocity curve. And so when you hit the ground, I'm sorry, the ground reaction force. And so when you hit the ground with the ground reaction force, you have the initial hit, that big break, and you have a big spike, followed by a drop and a low. And then you have the curve where that's the applicant force that is created from that. And so in everything you do, whether it's sprinting or jumping, there's an eccentric, an isometric amortization, then a concentric. That's braking, support, propulsion. And so if you think it from that standpoint, it's the easiest concept to teach and learn as far as, okay, how am I going to design my training to make sure that I'm handling all those different kind of things? And so, well, we talked about this earlier. You're on the ground, all those things I talked about, you're on the ground for 0.099 to 0.16 seconds. That's not fast enough to actually do a concentric muscle. It takes about 0.22 to 0.24 seconds to actually get a full muscle activation. So knowing that, it's got to be the reactive part of training. It's got to be the muscle stiffness. And that's what coaches do. You're starting to see it in different aspects. Even distance athletes are starting to do multi jumps and things to increase their muscle stiffness. They start to realize that just 0.001 increase in muscle stiffness, that reactive strength is going to make them a little bit faster. Now, they cheat in that because they're using these, those carbon plated shoes, which is giving them that. But they also are starting to do more bounding and more multi jumps and things like that. So when we start to get to jumps and getting into that where we are hitting with those and recruiting more muscles, we look at long jumping, high jumping, things like that, and that's to the extreme end. But the muscle stiffness and the stuff created from there is beneficial and can be at some degrees beneficial for a max velocity sprinter. And you look at some elite coaches, they do a lot of bounding, they do a lot of straight leg bounding, they do things like that to help increase that. And one of the things that I think people underestimate, and we'll talk a little bit later about this, is the dynamic core stability that is to plyometric kind of training. And that's one of the things I think if you can increase will help, because we know in 100 meters, it's not because of energy fatigue, it's coordination, because it's such a high end sprint kind of thing. And so being able to increase the dynamic core stability can increase, obviously, the force and how much force is created and the efficiency of that force.
Love that, love that. So, like you mentioned, uh, when we probably do sprinting or we do a high jump or long jump, the ground contact time was like so fast, we wouldn't be able to like really do a concentric muscle activate a contraction. So it's more about like leg stiffness.
Yeah,
So
and reactive strength. Yeah.
yeah. So just ask this because of like curiosity. So those things we do like full triple extension power clean or full triple extension like high pulse, does that really transfer to what we're doing on the sport?
Yes and no. Yes and no. There is I really like Bondarchuk. Bondarchuk has a great kind of correlation kind of thing. If you want to go a little bit back, a little bit older, and talk about specificity, kind of early stuff, you probably have to look a little into oh, now my brain is lacking the name. I'll come back to the name though when I
Okay.
think of it. But um, with that specifically is the fact that when you're training and you're going through jumping in that reactive strength, I always look at it from a standpoint of the elastic energy that you can create and that ability to create muscle stiffness and also teach the muscle that it can stretch a little bit longer and still be able to create power. And that's what we do when we're training. And so um, early on, you'll see things. I know a lot of people are kind of talking about this subject and talking about this, and they basically look at it from a standpoint of early on in the season when the foot hits the ground, you see the calcaneus almost kind of like either drop, supinate, or pronate, or rotate, or whatever it is. And so early on in the season, that's what you see. And as the athlete gets better and they're training and get the muscle gets stiffer. That's why you got to always be careful about looking at specific videos of athletes to know where they're at. Because an athlete, here's a perfect example. In 2012, Sonia Richardson Ross, she was running the indoors and she was using indoors to kind of get in shape to run later in the summer. And I remember as Sonia was running, when she got fatigued at the end, her leg was literally like, instead of stepping forward and straight, her leg was turned out like this. And she actually got caught by the British girl in the 4x4. And you're sitting there going, whoa, like, how did that happen? And part of it is, the British, they're very aggressive indoors and they train hard for indoors. We weren't Sonia had bigger, things on her plate. She wasn't training for indoors. She was using it as workouts to get ready for outdoors. But the biggest thing I saw is when she got fatigued, she started to actually go and have external rotation in her foot, collapse on the inside, and kind of pronate a little bit on the inside, and it was just fatigued. That same person that was the end of the 400. The same person at the Olympic final, her foot is pretty much straight, and she's not pronating, and she's she's hitting, but it's a pretty stable kind of foot system. And so just to me, it showed like how much training had been done in regards to muscle stiffness, speed, the ability to absorb the forces that were happening under fatigue at the end, and just the efficiency of movement. And so that was a reactive strength and all that kind of stuff. And it was firsthand. I remember that as clear as day is watching that, a girl who got caught in the 400 to winning, like running 48 point and winning the Olympic gold medal. And there's no way at that part of the season, that same girl lined up from Britain was going to get, handed pretty good. It's handled pretty good. And so, it's not a disrespect to one or the other, but it's the truth of how amazing that training is, and that you're looking at those kind of aspects of the muscle reaction, the muscle stiffness, all those kind of things.
So in order to train like the muscle stiffness or like the reactive strength, how like is it like hurdle jump or like the post on your Instagram like trap bar jumps?
It's great questions. And so I actually got away from the question you asked, and the question you asked was like about the triple extension
Yeah,
and
yeah.
your lift. And so the correlation of that initially might be like a 40% into sprinting, right? But then you have to go through the timeline and look at like, okay, how would I have more correlation, right? So then we would look at something like, I'll just talk long jump, for example. In the long jump at takeoff, the knee is slightly bent. So if you look at the femur and compared to this, and you look at the back of the knee, you probably see it about 155 to 165 degrees of flexion, right? And so doing a triple extension, like clean right there, from a full squat, I feel like there's smaller correlation than if you did a box clean where the knee was flexed and started at 155 to 165 degrees and you went up into that position. That's where I feel like there'd be more correlation. And then instead of doing double leg, then we start doing a single leg clean, right? With 155, 165 degree correlation. So as you go on that band of specificity, the correlation gets greater. Because if long jumping is, or sprinting is 100% of what you're doing, a squat initially may only have 40% correlation, but maybe doing a pulse squat, where we have less flexion and doing like not even a quarter squat, like a quarter eighth squat, something like that, that might have more correlation to kind of that. But then we know that from all the studies too, that doing a hex bar jump correlates even more with the sprinting action. So then maybe doing a single leg hex bar jump with that kind of knee flexion would even have the highest correlation. And so when you're thinking about training and specificity and correlation, that's when you start to get creative in your training and think about those kind of components. And I feel that, yes, you have to start off slower. You have to start off with full range of motion, and you have to progress through those things to get there. If you try to like just jump into, okay, we're going to do a single leg, hex bar jump, and we haven't done everything else, but we're going to increase our chances of injury and we're going to decrease the chances of success and correlation with that. So that's kind of how to think of it as a training kind of paradigm.
Cool. So it's sort of like periodization from
Yeah,
GPP to SPP, right?
exactly. And so that's exactly where periodization comes. And a lot of people say, well, I don't believe in periodization. No, you need to periodize or you're not going to be successful, because the problem is, in our sport, in every sport, if you sit there and you have your athlete, okay, they run 10 flat, right? But they run 10 flat in April, and then they can't, run 9-9, or they can't break 10, or they can't run 10 flat come August. You've done a terrible job of coaching, right? Because that athlete's not going to be successful. That athlete's not going to get to that next level. That athlete's not going to get a lane at competitions, things like that. So I think there's a lot of coaches who can get athletes to perform at a high level, but I think there's very few coaches who can get the athletes to perform when it counts the most. And I think that is truly the hardest thing about coaching. Oh, and the name of the person with correlation and training and specificity was Vern Gambetta.
Yeah,
So
love that. Love that. Appreciate that for the name, man.
yeah, of course, of course, of course.
So, like you mentioned, there's like bilateral, yeah, double leg clean to a single leg clean, and to single leg clean to a box. Is that sort of like the France box system you kind of like implemented?
I don't like. I mean, obviously, I beg, borrow, steal from all these different kind of people, but no, I mean, I don't live by one system. I believe in if anything, like if anybody asked what would be Jeremy Fisher's system. Jeremy Fisher's system are the max velocity athletic system, and that system is progression, and progression of general to specific, and making sure we progress through every step of everything. Because, if I'm seeing an athlete do hex bar jumps and they're using maybe 30-40% of their weight, and they're, getting valgus movement, and they're not able to stabilize their structure, then I can't get to single leg, hex bar movement. I shouldn't even be doing jump squats with them. I got to teach them how to do just regular hex bar lifts without that valgus movement. So, mine is much more individualized. Mine's much more progressive, and I definitely want to progress from general to specific. But I got to make sure that the development of the athlete warrants those changes and those movements, right? Because it might just be simple movements. It might be just jump squats with dumbbells, and they may only be like 5 kilo dumbbells because that's all they can progress through. And so I got to do. I'm not, that the biggest thing is the progression and development of the athlete for sure.
Cool, cool. So, uh, kind of want to go back to the things like you mentioned, like when when athletes do a long jump and when they kind of want to like launch at the last step, it's not really like a full extension for the knee. So, is that the same with when athletes do when they kind of like push on, let's say, sprinter on the block start?
So there's I think from a technical standpoint, the similarities probably stop at the sprint part. That's probably it. The actual jump and the block start probably don't have as much. But I think you can look at it from the training aspect. If you just keep it from a training aspect and muscle stiffness and reactive, I think that's where you'll probably have the best correlation of the two events. So long jumping and actual sprinting, because both want to require a lot of, good reactive strength, a lot of, muscle stiffness, things like that. Now, in the long jump, I'll break down technically the long jump. So technically in the long jump, what we want is we run as fast as possible. So part of that is runway maintenance. So, there are a lot of similarities from the runway to running like a 60-meter indoors. There's similarities from that, but we're only at about 97% of our max velocity on the runway because we have to have some of that reactive speed. And then what we're doing that's different in long jump versus the 100 is cyclical. I mean, you're basically starting and you're just cyclical through the whole movement through the finish line. Long jump goes from a cyclic, and then at the end of the cyclic, you have an acyclic movement. And so when you start to talk about just long jump, you have all the cyclic movement. So sprint mechanics and sprint form becomes so important because one, you're at 97% of your max velocity, and you're also then staying as tall on your hips, running with max velocity like sprint mechanics. And that cyclic movement then helps create a great acyclic movement of putting the foot down, driving the free leg, and jumping off. Yes, you are. The problem is a lot of athletes are trying to create height by, breaking posture, losing form, slowing down, braking, and really they want to run and jump off. I mean, Pedroso and Mike Powell and Carl Lewis, win the world championships. Carl, like, he just was fast, like, but he technically, and he was the greatest long jumper ever. But gosh, his technical improvement could have been a little bit better. It's hard to say that, but it's the truth. Where Pedroso was probably the cleanest technical, I would say, from a technical standpoint, and because he didn't have the same tools that Carl did, and is jumping pretty much the same as Carl. Like, he wasn't as fast, he wasn't as tall, but technically just way better, like just unbelievable. And he maintained his speed. He kept a nice cyclic movement right into the acyclic off the board and just ran off the board. And that's what you want to teach, athletes to do, is run through the board and keep that speed and movement. And so that's and then in the sprints, yes, you want to stay tall in the hips. You want to stay, with heel to the butt, good, front side mechanics, and all. So there's a lot of similarities in there. But as far as speed wise and correlation, the 200 is more correlated to the speed on the long jump, because in the 200 you're about 95 to 97% of your max velocity. If you go to absolute, you're going to die, obviously. And that's the same kind of speed and stuff we carry on the long jump runway. So the 200 a lot of times is a good comparison as far as sprint mechanics, sprint speed, and everything else to runway mechanics for the long jump.
Yeah, love this. So next thing I want to ask is about like the hurdle jump. I saw you like implement different ways to like train hurdle jump. No matter it's like a stiff landing or like a different direction or continuously. But
Mm-hmm.
like we talked before, when we are like no matter sprinting or like jumping, our ground contact time is was so short. It's not like hurdle jump. So why do you like implement hurdle jump in your training?
I like hurdle jumps for a couple things. So hurdle jump can, and I'm not a one of those. I put my hurdles as high as possible. I actually always like my hurdle with the lowest possible setting. I'm not into. I'd rather have a stiff leg hurdle hop than have a deep, hurdle catch. Because to me, the only difference between a hurdle at 33 compared to, or I'm sorry, like at the low setting versus like the high hurdle setting is your ability to have flexibility at the hips and bring the hurdle up. But to me, that's not. I don't think that's as warranted and needed. But you still want to have increases of force to train those kind of things. You can't just live in I want every ground reaction time to be 0.99 or zero point 0.1 seconds. It's okay to have ground contact times that are 0.16 or 0.18 or something like that, because for each athlete you want them to get more efficient as time goes on, so they are at it. And I don't know
Uh,
if that was
yeah.
all right.
So
So back
yeah.
to the hurdle hop kind of thing. So basically, when you do hurdle hops, it's all training can't be 100% correlation. So still doing those will create some correlation to jumping and muscle stiffness and all those kind of things. So they don't necessarily have to be. But one thing you definitely don't want to do is you don't want to do those hurdle hops like in the middle of right in the champ part or this trying to get fresh, right? Or you can do lower hurdle hops, or hopefully you train your athlete to get off the ground super fast so that they correlate a little bit better to what you're trying to do. But the reason for changing direction in that is you can't stay linear all the time. Sprinting and jumping, it tends to be linear in motion, but you have some rotational factors and things like that. And I think a lot of injuries can come up if you don't start to work on some of those bilateral or some of those side to stop and go and side to side things. So we address those all the time early in the season. So we're still addressing them, in the general and maybe the specific prep phases of training. And we're making sure that we have some of those things because you have rotational values even when you're running linear. And so you address those. So some of the hurdle hops may be over a hurdle hop, jump right, jump left, jump middle, then jump over, jump right, jump left, jump middle. So the sticking is working on that eccentric a little bit. So you're getting used to being able to hit the ground and then obviously hitting the ground and reacting and jumping over to the next or jumping to the side. Those are just little things we do. And a lot of those hurdle hops, if you're looking at periodization, are done earlier in the season. And when we're still building the whole kind of system for athlete. So a lot of those things can be done in general prep, specific prep, and then we probably cut them out as we get closer to competitions, and we may reassess them after some later in the season just to get them back in the system again and get the athlete used to doing stuff that's not just linear.
Great, great. So can you give us an example about like how you program the hurdle jump? I mentioned before, like is did do you start from like landing to like hard landing into like continuous or what's the progress?
So if a plyometric, the way I progress is we start off jump ups. And so we'll jump up onto boxes. So we jump up onto maybe a 10 meter, I'm sorry, 10 meter, 10 centimeter, 20 centimeter, 30, 40, 50 boxes. And we'll do like 3 sets of 8 of that stuff in the season. And that may be a kind of a pre-activation before we do some sprint stuff, right? Some short acceleration sprint stuff, because those are very dynamic in nature. And then after I feel comfortable with that, we've done a nice little training block. Then we start some eccentric where we do some box drops, and we'll do box drops at 10, 20, 30 centimeters. And I want to teach them that they can land solid and they get the eccentric and they land stable and have some of that muscle stiffness. And then after I feel like we're done with that kind of thing, then we may do some box drops with reaction. So we'll drop off the box, and then we'll kind of jump onto another box or whatever it is. And we're not doing everything just up onto the box. We may be doing side to side jumps, and we may be doing when we're dropping off a box and then we're going kind of a little bit further out, we're doing single leg support stuff. So things progressing, like I said, through the plyometrics. And then in that time, we're doing hurdle hops, and I'm teaching them how to jump over them, teaching them how to land. And we may do 2 to 3 weeks or 2 to 4 weeks of just jumping over and sticking that landing and working on that and jumping over. Then after 4 weeks, then we'll do a dynamic. Then after that 4 weeks, we may start to add some lateral stuff into it. So like I said, everything is a progression. Everything is done with that in mind of an athlete through those movements.
Great.
And so, and then now we're doing a really specific thing. So we're actually doing hurdle hop onto a plyo box, and we're hitting and reacting as fast as we can off that plyo box. And so one of the things I post on ig, we kind of did it, and the kids love it, but we do hurdle hop, then off the box as quick as we can and land on the mat. And we do it double leg and we do it single leg. And so we get very specific with that. And the big thing is how they get off that box at the Okay. Yeah, so I think as I was saying, just the plyo boxes, you got to progress and get to specificity with that, and then you can do single leg plyo box drops, you can do single leg plyo box reactive, but you have to build to that. Just like we talked about in the weight room, you've got to build to that specific plyometric, but it also has to be progressed and gone through the different kind of realms. And that has a lot more correlation, again, and a lot more specificity.
Cool. So, I saw it's also on Instagram. You're training a Chinese long jumper, and he's holding a dumbbell and doing some single leg dynamic box hold.
Mm-hmm. So right now it's kind of a cool time. This is my favorite training block of the whole entire season. And we're doing an eccentric with a post-active potentiation training thing. And so we have some isometrics in there too. So I'll go through it. Again, I like to share everything. So Monday is a very dynamic day. So Monday we do box cleans, and we're doing a double leg box clean. Again, the weight starts out of probably right above the knee. The flexion of the knee is about 165 degrees. And they're just doing box cleans from there. Then from there, what we'll do is then everything's dynamic on Monday. So it's an approach day. So it's like an acceleration day. We use the 1080 machine, and we're doing like 10 kilos for 20-meter accels kind of things. And then we're going to do a box. So what we do is we have 2 boxes, and we do a split box hold for a count of 2. So the athlete will start in the middle, jump up in a split position with dumbbells in hand, and hold for a count of 2. So we get a little bit that eccentric and that catch. Okay. Then they'll drop down and then split the other way. And they do kind of those with different, right now I think they're using 40-pound dumbbells, but the weight of that and catching in that eccentric stretch position just helps train some of that muscle stiffness and a little bit of the eccentric and so forth like that. And then in between sets, they'll do that with no weight, and they'll do it fast and as dynamic as possible. And I'm not worried about the catch on top of the boxes. The biggest thing is that they're trying to hit the ground as fast as they can. And those boxes are only about probably 15 centimeters high. So they're not very high, maybe 10 centimeters. So it's not a super high kind of box drop. And then They'll follow that up. On Monday, they have some hex bar jumps. And so that's a very dynamic dumbbell jumps. So they'll do dumbbell squat jumps. And again, flexion's about 155, 165 degrees. And they're jumping with they'll do like 4 repetitions where they're jumping with the dumbbell, put the dumbbells down, and then do 4 repetitions without the dumbbell quick. And so a lot of that has post-activation potentiation there. And then on the other drill I really like what they're doing right now is the other day I posted, and it's Wu Ruting, who's a log triple jumper, one of the top triple jumpers in the country or in the world, and one of China's top triple jumpers. He's doing an eccentric, 5-second eccentric down on the leg press. He has a little bit of spinal issues because he's 2 meters tall, 199. And so we got to be careful, obviously, the load on his spine. So he's actually in a leg press machine doing negatives. And then right after that, he's pushing into an isometric hold for 7 seconds where he's got just a little bit of flexion. It's probably not 165. It's probably close to like 185, 180 degrees. And he's just pushing into that for 7 seconds on each leg. And so those are the post-active potentiation, the isometric things that they're doing kind of back to back. And this is fun for me. It's creative, and it gets the athlete ready for all those forces they're about to hit. Because in the long jump, you're hitting with about 8 times the body weight. In triple jump, you're landing on about 18 times the body weight, and high jump something about 8 to 12 times body weight in takeoff. So they're getting ready for all those forces and the demands of the event.
So focusing on eccentric is preparing your athlete for the high load of landing. Am I right?
Eccentric and isometric, exactly. Because again, it gets back to that. Everything you do is eccentric, isometric, and concentric, or braking propulsion, braking stability or support, and then propulsion. So it's getting them ready for all those things.
Love this, love this. And finally, gonna go into the dynamic core stability. I really love this. So can you help us understand your approach to the core stability for like training them as a jumper or like sprinters?
For sure. So a lot of times what happens is people will work on their core, and they'll do abs, and they'll do planks and all that kind of stuff. But one thing I don't like about it is a plank is still laying down. Never as a active athlete are we laying down, and it's a good exercise to do, and we do it. But you have to progress that just like everything else. Like your abs can be abs, your core stability can be, your planking can be planking, and all those things can be the physio ball, ab stuff. All that stuff is great, and it's a great baseline of work to be done, but it has to go through stability when we're dynamic. It's they did a study, they did a psychological study, and they were looking at people trying to perform hard tasks while they were cycling. And as the task became harder and they had to concentrate it on a psychological level, their pedals either became non-existent, they stopped pedaling, or they slowed down increasingly, because it's hard to be under stress when we're physiologically stimulated, right? And so from that kind of, haphazardly or roundedly, as we look at kind of the core stability thing, is that all those other things is like kind of like us doing exercises when we're able to when we're able to concentrate, when we're not having a lot of physical stimulation. That's what a plank and that's what abs and stuff are. But we have to be able to really concentrate on the dynamic core stability. And now a lot of that came from Jill McNitt, who's the biomechanist at USC, who works with USA Track and Field. And we learned that a lot of athletes lose add a lot of rotation in their head, spine, hips when they take off. And just adding that rotation and all that stuff means we're going to lose a lot of force into the ground. So working on that core stabilization or that dynamic core stability, we do things where we may, simply walk over hurdles with a med ball out in front of us. We may run with a stick over our head. We may work with some kind of very low plyometrics, where we're actually working with a stick on our shoulder or stick over our head. So we're having to stabilize that core, that head, that spine, and hips and pelvic girdle as we're doing some of those things. And the more the athlete builds that dynamic core stability, the less force that's going to be lost through. And so we start to do things where we're working on our pelvic floor, where we're working on our ability for movement and to be able to really keep that core engaged. And the more the core is engaged through movement that's dynamic, like bounding with the stick over our head and, low key. But again, we're progressing to that level. So we're doing all the planking and abs early, and then we're progressing with simple little things like jog or doing drills sometimes with sticks and stuff like that to work on that core stability. So those are things that we kind of look at and try to progress and try to work on so that we can really work on that core stability before we can build what we're trying to do. And so I think it's overlooked a lot of times, but it's definitely something that should be implemented into your sprinting and your running and your jumping for sure.
So, can you like also give us some like example for how you're gonna build up their core stability? Is it from like holding a bar in front or holding a bar in like higher? And what is the difference between holding in front or holding higher or just putting a bar on your back?
Yeah. So great question. And so it changes kind of some of the things. And here's what people have to understand. Strength training is not just from a lift as much weight and have a bar and all that kind of stuff. Strength training can be done with a weighted vest. Strength training can be done when you're pulling a sled. Strength training can be running up a hill. Strength training can be anything that just causes a little bit more of force than just your natural body weight. And even your body weight can be strength kind of concepts that way. So with the progression of that, we would do definitely core stability. We just do planking, all that kind of stuff early on. I love physio balls and doing a lot of ab stuff, physio balls, using med balls for abs, things like that. But then we do a lot of things where we're using very light med balls. We're only using like 2 kilo, 3 kilo, 4 kilo med balls. And we're doing walking drills and we're walking with it over our head. And when we work it away from our head and from that, what we start to do is we start to really stabilize. And when we are over our head, we're starting to use our transverse abs a little bit. And when we use, we're using our erector spinae and TFL and a little bit of our front side. You can say some of your like psoas and stuff to stabilize that. When you start to bring things in front, and stabilize there, then you're using your transverse abs, which changes a little bit. Your transverse abs, when they engage, they make the hips neutral, right? And so sometimes when they make the hips neutral, then that path is also free, right? Because a lot of athletes have anterior rotation. And when you engage in transverse abs, it makes the hips neutral. Then all of a sudden, this leg, this thigh that couldn't get up to parallel because it had the anterior rotation starts to be behind you. But once you use the transverse abs, it makes it neutral, and then all of a sudden this thigh comes up and your front side mechanics becomes a little bit better. And so there's a technical aspect from it and a mechanical aspect from it and a physiological aspect from it. And so a biomechanical aspect of it. And so whether you're using it over your head, you're using your iliopsoas, a lot of stabilization to keep that away compared to if you're using it from the front and holding it out here. The thing, obviously, you got to use a lighter weight if you're holding it out front because of you're going to start to get fatigued with the shoulders and stuff like that. And anything away from your body, you're going to start to use the erector spinae a little bit too. And that could, bother that too. So you got to make sure you're careful with that. And again, we're walking initially, and then we're getting into maybe some jogging, and then we're getting into some sprinting. With the weights, when we're doing, stuff where we have the weights and you see us skipping, you see us doing a little bit of high knee runs and stuff like that. That's a pre-weight, very specific exercise we do. So it's not considered within the realm of an actual technical sprint day. To me, that's a technical strength specific thing. And that's how I break those up. And so Again, I'm progressing into that, and I would never have a bar, like a heavy bar with that in front. I might use a light stick. The things we order from Amazon is those sticks you put in the ground in case there's a lot of rain or there's too much snow to see how much flooding happens. They're so cheap. They're like $20 on Amazon. And I use those all the time. I use both, like I'd say like, I don't even know. And they're like basically 3 feet in America. So, 36 inches. I can't do the math, maybe 60 centimeters. And there's ones that are like 90 centimeters. And those are the two sticks I use for the athletes. And we use those when we're running sometimes more dynamic, because I don't want a lot of weight. I want the athlete to do things dynamic, explosive, and still be cautious of not trying to hurt themselves and stuff like that. So my high jumpers use a lot when they're doing their snake runs and their circle runs, so I can see shoulder position and to stabilize the core. And then later on in the season, we'll do stick runs with that. Like we'll do sometimes wicket runs and stuff like that so that we can see that core stability. But we got to, again, build up to that level.
Great. I really love our conversation today.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you.
So for those who are interested in what we are talking about today, where can they reach out to you? And where can they find the Max Velocity Academy? Am I right?
Yeah, Maximum Velocity Athletics. Here I've got the
All right.
perfect thing. Put it up close so they can kind of see it.
Okay,
And
okay.
it shows a little bit of everything. They can look at that QR code if they use their phone. But basically, there's many places. It's maximumvelocityathletics.com. They can go to the website. They can follow me on Instagram, Jeremy FHJ. I have a podcast myself. It's called Jump In It Podcast, and I talk about all things training. They can also go to anyquestions.com, Jeremy FHJ. And there, and I mean, between all those sites, they can see camps, clinics, they can see all this information. They can follow me on YouTube at Jeremy FHJ, Jeremy Fischer, and I have videos everywhere and things for people to see. Because my thing is, I'm not. Yes, I have a business and I'm trying to run it, but my main thing is to get as much good information out there as possible. So
Cool.
thanks for having
Appreciate it.
me on, and I appreciate talking to you. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me and share my passion of track and field and sprinting
No,
and all the things.
I appreciate that. I learned a lot.
Good. I'm glad. Fantastic. All right. Well, you have a great weekend.
You
And
too.
hopefully, sometime when we're out there, we can meet up because I'll be in China a few times this
Okay,
year. So,
cool.
all right.
You have a nice day,
Take
okay?
care. Have a great day. All right.
I'm gonna invite you on again, okay?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
See you. Have a nice
Thanks.
day.
Have a great day.